Good afternoon. Welcome to our continuing series on brand safety, and in particular, how we think about social responsibility. So those things that are important to us in terms of ethically and morally, how we appear as brands and marketers to the general consumer populace. Today, we are continuing a conversation that we started a couple of weeks ago on diverse communities, or DE&I. Various people call it sort of different things, but we're going to jump right into it. So in our first interview, we had Amanda and George, who are both here, and led a conversation with a guest from Pink Media. They are, or we are very fortunate that they've been able to get another guest for us today to talk with, and that's Curtis Sparrer. And Curtis is going to share some really interesting perspectives with us in quite a second. So just Amanda and George, just we're back for version number 2. Just quickly, can you talk about sort of the importance of keeping this conversation around inclusiveness going, and what we may have to look forward to in this conversation today?
Yes, as co-founders of Infinity Partnerships, an inclusive ad tech consulting firm, inclusiveness is very important to us, and we believe that it's a conversation that should be happening year-round, not just at certain tentpole events or times of year or certain, history months. We need to be talking about this year-round and making inclusivity a priority every day. Right on.
So Curtis, on to you. So do me a favor, tell us sort of who you are, what you do, and what's the story in terms of how you wound up where you are today, and just tell us a little bit about Bospar in the business.
Just that. So my name, Curtis, is not my official full name. I was a Christopher, but I think there are so many Chris's out there that Curtis sounded a bit more original. It was my middle name. And in a way, that's the fundamental issue about PR and any kind of communication, is thinking about how you can stand out and be different. And certainly brands need to partner with diverse communities to make sure that their message is being different than everything else out there and landing in the right way, in the right appropriate way. And so Bospar, I'm the spar in the bow, is a PR agency. We started off as a work from home agency with a national footprint way back when in 2015, when that was really odd, really weird. And people would say, oh gosh, I need people to have a water cooler to really believe that I can trust them. But we started winning awards. You can see them behind me. And
just a few.
And we took a page from our PR playbook to show that, yeah, we are a new idea. We are a new way of doing things, but it works. And then COVID happened. And then everyone understood that you did not need a water cooler or an office to have a good corporate culture. And so part of what we've been doing is we've been working with the LGBTQIA community, so much so that I can say that fast several times without flinching. And I think the thing about it is that that's not most of what we do. Most of what we do is tech and healthcare PR. But if you haven't guessed by now, I'm kind of gay. And I can't look at myself in the mirror and see these sort of problems and not help out. San Francisco Pride came to us a few years ago and said, hey, we need help. And our PR team just quit. Could you help us? And we said, absolutely. And so while we had not focused on issues PR before, we used every tool in our PR tech playbook to help take San Francisco Pride to not having much money in the bank to having a lot of money in the bank in the period of 6 weeks. And we've done this again for them this year. And so other LGBTQIA causes and organizations have come to us saying, hey, how can I get involved? And what we saw at Cannes was a situation where a lot of people have been talking about, yes, we want to be inclusive. We want to have LGBTQIA viewpoints. But when I went there the first time, I was like, kind of boring. There's not many things to do if you're gay. There's not anything, there's no place to have fun or just let your hair down. Sure, there were seminars, there were plenaries, there were meetings, and people would be talking about it in a very academic way, which would help marketers, obviously. But there wasn't a sense of community where you could just hang out, tell a joke, just not be around like the super bro-y, testosterone-y feel of other clubs and parties that were going on there. And so that's why we launched Club Courage. And we did it in such a way as to honor the LGBTQIA community and the brands that were sticking up for them. Because you might remember, not so long ago, we had a couple hiccups where brands played chicken with conservatives and they blinked. And we wanted to reward brands that stood up for us. And this is going to be something that is ongoing because conservatives have tasted blood in the water and they're not going to let it go.
No.
And so we need to really make sure that not only is the community that I come from feeling protected by brands, but also that brands are encouraged to reach out to communities of color, communities that are not quote unquote mainstream, and stick with those programs. Our own research discovered.
Can I stop you?
Please stop me. I talk too long.
Can I ask you to repeat that? Because what you said was super critical right there, right? What can brands do to make you feel comfortable, right? And people sort of miss that point. So, you know, I have said in certain circumstances, and I work on a bunch of different boards, one that's focused on diversity. And one of the comments that I made in one of the meetings was, you know, people seem to forget, you know, this approach to diverse seems to sort of fall into the 9 to 5. It's part of my job perspective. And when I go home, right, to my non-diverse neighborhood, in my non-diverse family, I stop thinking about it until I show up to work tomorrow. And so there's, I think, something really key to the idea of making community. If you're going to play with a community, make that community feel comfortable, make that community trust you.
Mm-hmm. And
right?
I think that that's the thing. You have to be authentic. You have to know regularly what said community is thinking and doing. And you can't just do it on certain days of the week, month, etc. You have to be thinking year round. For example, yes, the big LGBTQIA media moment happens in June, but there are important people from that community that have milestones, that have events. Like, you know, when I think of Alan Turing, who is credited with the advances in mathematics and AI, and he was critical for the World War II effort. He can be celebrated too outside of June for a variety of reasons, as we're seeing right now with the AI revolution. And that's just one tiny example of how brands and companies can be thinking about this so that it's authentic, that it's true, it doesn't have the ick smell or of opportunism, and it's bringing us in.
Right. So tell us a little bit more about the concept of Club Courage. Like, what were the mechanics? Who was involved? You know, how did it play out? And you know, how successful do you believe it was?
Fundamentally, Club Courage was a statement that the LGBTQIA plus community needed a space at Con that was fun and that was for them. In a strategic, bigger picture point of view, we also needed to have research that showed how people felt about brands that supported not just my community, but other communities. We discovered out of 5,000 people surveyed worldwide that most people would spend more money with the brand if they invested in the LGBTQIA folk. They also found that they would invest more money if they supported women, if they supported people of color. And this was not true just in the US, but Canada, the UK, France, and Germany. And we thought that having this sort of intellectual scholarship about the issue was important and critical because, yeah, it's great to have a party, but you need to have that on a bedrock of thinking. And that's what that was to serve for. So when you went to Club Courage, where you had the local drag queen there, you also saw our research being flashed on the screen, as well as reporters there who were getting the information, because after all, we are a PR agency. And so the idea is we didn't want to be carpetbaggers. We didn't want to bring in our talent from San Francisco or New York. And so we talked to one drag queen who was trying to set up her own drag club in Cannes, and we said, hey, if you want to do this, we'd love to help give you extra exposure. And so that was part of it. We had a lot of locals there, but we also brought in people from all over who were at Cannes. In fact, I had one guy from a certain country where being LGBTQIA isn't really allowed, and he told me the story about how he was thinking of moving with his boyfriend to a different country to find a place that was better for him. And he wouldn't have been able to find me and get my advice on the matter if we hadn't done something like Club Courage. And ultimately, that's what we want to do. We want to create high moments of visibility that people feel good about participating. We don't want it to be a chore. We want it to be fun, and we want it to be meaningful.
That's great. That's great. Good for you. And meaningful moments are always highly valuable for individuals, not only from a resource standpoint, like you mentioned, but just from an informational standpoint as well. So kudos to you. Kudos to you. So from a Cannes perspective, right, Amanda, both you and George were there as well. Can you give me some reflection points on sort of what it was like to be at Cannes and your perspective on how central or not the conversation around diverse communities was?
Yeah, definitely. I can go first. I have been to Cannes 3 times at this point, and to Curtis's point, the challenge in the past has been this sort of imposter syndrome when you go into a space where you're not really vibing with the parties that are super fun, the meetings that are happening, on these yachts, the excursions that are going on to Saint-Tropez or Monaco. So that is the external image of Cannes, I believe. And it's super important to give individuals spaces to congregate. Things have changed where you do have Group M now having the diversity rooftop. You do have major companies acknowledging Pride in ways that they haven't before. I think there was a Pride party this past year, but a lot of it is not focused on action, in our opinion. A lot of it is attention versus action. So that plays on a lot of work that Amanda and I have been doing with our company over the past year. We partnered with Google for the Black and the Latinx Summit in New York. And so that's why we did that attention versus action panel in Cannes. We think things are changing. They're changing very slowly. And what Curtis did is important because, to his point, when I 3 years ago, when I was going to Cannes, one of the things I searched for was gay bar in Cannes. What is available? There's nothing available. So I think it's important. I think it's important to get the community together. I think it's important to break this imposter syndrome because it is prolific, especially if you're not looking like everybody else, if you're not from the same kind of background as everybody else. I think, Amanda, you have similar probably feedback, right?
Yeah, I think that's great, George. Yeah, the only thing that I would add is I think Cannes is a great event. It's a meeting of the minds. Everyone from ad tech to the agency to the publisher side is there, and all the thought leaders. And it's great that they are starting to have more diverse and inclusive conversations about the LGBTQIA community and people of color. But what the biggest takeaway is that there's just not enough action. We need to dig deeper and really talk about how are we going to move the needle forward. What are we going to be, actionable steps that we're all going to take? Because we have to remember, these communities, these are people in our everyday lives. They're our friends, they're our neighbors, family members, they're our kids, teachers, and we need to have this inclusive movement and this conversation going daily. So it's just important that we keep this conversation going and we keep talking about tactics that can actually help move the needle.
Sure. Thank you. When you talk about sort of comfort and inclusiveness, I also sort of in another board meeting, someone threw out a statistic that 46% of LGBTQIA folks do not identify at work.
Mm-hmm.
What a shame, right? And so, you have to consider what's flowing through their mind in terms of what the risk factor is, right? And so then I'd like to flip back to you, Curtis. So, all right, so you have a wonderfully large and productive PR business. You just started doing work for San Francisco Pride. So the Pride work didn't define you. Your other work defined you. And so it may be a difficult question, but how do you walk that line? How do you how do you be from the community, do great work for everybody, and then come back and wrap your arms around the community, your personal community? Did that make sense as a question?
It did. And,
Okay.
the thing is that there are some risks. I remember I was up for an award for a certain organization, and I got to look at the judges' comments, and one judge dismissed us as a LGBTQIA lobby group and just gave everything that we did, absolute low scores that were way out of proportion to what everyone else was judging us as. And I knew this was odd because some of these awards are actually for the entry that he sunk. In fact, Khan, shortlisted our work, which this judge thought was, not up to snuff. And so that told me that for all our, beating of our chest of pride, 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 yeah, you are going to be also on the crosshairs of some haters. And that's just the game. And we have to steer ourselves from that and make sure that we know that we're better than that and we're not going to be shook. I'm trying to use all the young kid terms, by the way.
Right on.
So in the instance of that moment, I went to the contest organizers and I showed them everything. And I said how we were really not described correctly. And part of that is something that LGBTQIA people have had to do from the get-go, is you have to describe yourself. It is perhaps the most meaningful form of branding and crisis communications is when you figure out who you are, how to express what that means in a way that makes sense to other people. So yes, Bospar is a tech PR firm, just like I'm a tech PR guy who happens to be gay. But that happens to be gay isn't, happenstance that's small and trivial. It's important. And my ability to integrate that as a professional that people can do business with, regardless of whether we're talking about issues of gender or sexuality or issues of data lakes and artificial intelligence, is one that I think the Bay Area does really well at. And I also think, I hate to be all coastal elite, but yeah, the coasts are really good with. And it becomes a matter of educating other people who may not be as savvy. And if we're not for everyone, hey, that's okay. But the thing that is important is that we take a stance and we defend it and we promote it and we explain it, just like we would do as a human being every day.
Right on. Well done. So then that brings me sort of to, all right, so given that perspective, right? What advice would you give to marketers, agencies, people who are generally in the marketing, PR, advertising sectors in terms of, what is the right, how do you get to the right approach, right? For being appropriately inclusive. And it's inclusiveness is probably not for everybody. But there are brands and businesses for whom it's quite significant, right? And how do you manage that sort of balance?
The age-old question, right?
Yeah.
I would have to say, and I'm trying not to whiff this question, but I would say that it's always a work in progress. And
Yeah.
it's always something that you're calibrating day by day. I think the most important thing you need is people who are going to be rewarded for telling you the truth. I think the entrepreneurs who really screw up big are the ones who are in their own reality distortion field, and no one can tell them they're messing up. I'm looking at you, Elon Musk, but it's not just Elon Musk. It's not just tech. I mean, George Lucas of Star Wars gave us Jar Jar Binks. Clearly, no one could tell him that was a bad idea either. And so having people who can tell you that is critical. And having a diverse group of people to tell you that is even more important. Because what I might think is okay as a white cisgender male may absolutely be not okay for other people. And I need to know what those other people are thinking. It's a matter of not just being quote unquote PC, it's a matter of being smart, because this world is filled with all sorts of people who have important ideas and opinions that you can get information from and development from, and even clients from. And so there is a absolutely selfish reason to be thoughtful and think about everyone. And so if I had any advice to people, it would be, don't buy your own PR.
Touche, well done. Touche, well done. Yeah. So one of the other conversations that around the idea of inclusivity is this idea that and you hit right on this, is in order to deliver the right product to the outside world, right? You got to get your inside act together, right? And so what's the complexion of your team, right? Are they diverse enough to be able to sort of understand where you're going as a brand, help keep you out of the danger zone, right? And actually give you language and insights, right, from that diverse community that that a brand can actually leverage in good and appropriate ways. So, so now what happens after Club Courage? Is there more stuff coming in the fall?
Is there more courage? The answer is yes.
Right.
A lot of people are talking to me about what they'd like to see next year and how we could partner with different organizations and different resources. I was delighted, for example, that GLAAD was there. I want to work with them to do something even more transformative than what we did, this year. I think that we're also going to have to look at the issues of the day and see how those issues matter. And then we're going to also need to think, well, Cannes is the only place that needs this kind of space. There are many other events where there are a whole bunch of people there thinking, boy, I just don't feel seen here. And I just don't feel like there's a place I can just, relax. And so we're looking at other venues like that need that kind of space.
All right. Well, we should talk because so socially we've got a long way to go, right, in terms of solving for the issue. And again, it's that perspective of diversity becomes this thing that you do between 9 and 5 on your job, and then it's out of your mind for the other 16 hours, right? So, all right. Okay. So now, back to you, Amanda and George. So talking about sort of from a business standpoint. So, Curtis gave us the jump off point. So I want to bring it back to sort of some executional elements, right? And you guys have sort of raised this idea of, be mindful of the tactics that you're employing for brand safety, because you might inadvertently be cutting off diverse people at the pass, if you will. And I take the supposition that, in order for you to be conscious of those things, they have to be upfront in your strategy, right? We are consciously, deliberately, on purpose, right, trying to have a strategy and a focus on diverse people. But want you guys to talk a little bit about not falling into the traps of, familiar sort of operational mechanisms that then mask everything that we're trying to do.
Sure. Yeah, I think you summarized it perfectly, Louis, just that you have to start with the strategy. The strategy has to be inclusive, because if the strategy is not there, then anything else that you try to do is going to fall apart. So from a top level, how can you make sure that you're working with diverse suppliers? How can you make sure that you have a diverse team of people working on your business? How can you work with diverse publishers and minority-owned business? How can you have diverse people represented in your ads? Just thinking about all of that stuff from the top and making that the priority, because if not, then anything else that you try to do is just going to fall apart. Like George and I see this all the time in working with several clients. We run into issues with supply path optimization, with keyword blocking, all those sorts of things. And I don't know, George, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, thanks, Amanda. For sure, we see lots of problems, but we do see some movement towards success. Big part of this, I believe, is thinking about the metrics equitably. Oftentimes what will happen from what we have seen is that multicultural buys fit within a certain bucket and are sometimes designed to not succeed from the strategy phases. It could be something very simple as reach, right? When you look at general market reach across the open web, and then if you look at BIPOC reach, as an example, Black, Hispanic, people of color, there's oftentimes not an acknowledgement from the marketing side how the populations differ in size. So simply because of reach, strategies can be devalued. So there needs to be a broader conversation around KPIs in relation to who you are looking to reach. And I think another important thing that I'll close with for this part of the conversation, Curtis mentioned this, is the multidimensional nature of individuals. We were having a convo with a major Hispanic publisher earlier today, and there are inherent challenges, as Curtis mentioned, where parts of the community may not be okay with LGBTQ being aligned with Afro-Hispanic culture. So there needs to be a way of accommodating and moving the category forward in general, with the acknowledgement that somebody may be Black and gay, somebody may be Black, trans, Hispanic, and gay. So there's many different things that need to be thought about at the strategy phase, in our opinion.
Yeah, so this notion of intersectionality is a tough one, right? But even if you consider that statistic of 46% of gay people don't identify in the workplace, you've got some inherent problems. However, to the extent that you honor those attributes, right, you make people more comfortable over time. And so there, in my mind, there's a responsible role that brands can play. Not all brands should or want to, but some brands should, and they should at least be cognizant, right? And it comes back to Curtis's genius, right? As I sit back here and I reflect on sort of what we talked about, I mean, the notion how you came up with courage for club courage is impressive, because at the end of the day, that's what it's really all about. People having enough courage to stand for what they believe in, right? And so beyond sort of the rhetoric, right? But it's the proverbial put your money where your mouth is kind of perspective. So thank you for a lesson in courageousness today, Curtis. Delightful to talk with you today. Good to see you again, Amanda and George, and I'm sure there are more conversations in our future. And I'm going to throw it off to Curtis to sort of close us out with sort of an idea about courage and what people sort of need to keep in mind and embody, right, as they think about the work that they go about day in and day out, and sort of how do they keep courage sort of front and center in the things that they do?
I believe fundamentally that we get the world we deserve. And if you're looking at the headlines right now, it's kind of scary. And that means we can't sit on the sidelines as communicators, as marketers, as advertisers. We all are going to inherit the planet we deserve. And if we don't fight for what's right, well, it's on us.